The 2026 Formula One season has just started in Australia. And after the very first day of running, Lewis Hamilton has already done something that made the entire paddock stop and look. Because what Hamilton showed in the Ferrari SF-26 today was not normal. Not for the first day of the season. Not for a circuit like Albert Park. And definitely not for a car built around one of the most aggressive technical concepts on the grid. Here is what shocked everyone. During the first practice session of the Australian Grand Prix, the timing screens suddenly showed something that immediately caught attention across every garage. Ferrari, first. Second, Charles Leclerc at the top. Lewis Hamilton right behind him. A Ferrari 1-2 on the very first practice session of the 2026 season. But the lap times are not the real story, because engineers watching the onboard cameras noticed something far more interesting. The Ferrari looked planted, through the fast corners, through the heavy braking zones, and especially on corner exit, where traction normally becomes a problem on a green track like Melbourne. But the SF-26 did not look nervous. It looked stable, and Lewis Hamilton looked completely comfortable driving it. That is what surprised the paddock the most. This is now Hamilton's second season with Ferrari. And today, for the first time, it looked like he and the car might finally be perfectly synchronized. Smooth braking, precise corner entry, and extremely controlled acceleration out of slow corners. Exactly the style that made Hamilton one of the most dominant drivers in Formula One history. But here is the part that makes this story even bigger. Because the Ferrari SF-26 is not just another evolution. It is one of the most ambitious cars Ferrari has designed in years. A compact power unit running extremely high combustion pressures, very tight bodywork packaging, and a complex aerodynamic platform designed to generate huge stability when the driver applies the throttle, which explains why the car looked so strong on corner exits today. And if what we saw in Melbourne today is real, then the rest of the grid might already have a serious problem. Because if Lewis Hamilton has truly found comfort inside the Ferrari, and if the SF-26 has the pace many engineers are starting to suspect, then the 2026 championship might have just become a lot more dangerous for everyone else. And what happened during the rest of the day in Australia only made this story even more interesting. But what made today in Melbourne even more surprising is how quickly Ferrari showed its pace. Because normally, the first session of a Formula One season is messy. Very messy. Teams arrive with months of development behind them. New aerodynamics, new engine settings, new simulations that may or may not match reality. The first practice session is usually about verification, checking sensors, comparing data with wind tunnel numbers, making sure the car behaves the way engineers predicted. Lap times are almost secondary. But today, Ferrari looked ready from the moment the cars left the garage. Charles Leclerc was the first to show it. As the session progressed, the Ferrari began climbing the timing sheets, sector by sector improving, until suddenly the name at the top of the screen was Ferrari. Leclerc in first place. And then something even more interesting appeared. Lewis Hamilton, right behind him, second place, a Ferrari 1-2, on the very first session of the entire 2026 championship. That alone was enough to make rival engineers look twice. But what really caught attention was not the position. It was the behavior of the car. Watching the onboard cameras, the Ferrari SF-26 looked extremely stable. Through the fast chicane, through the medium speed corners, even when the drivers attacked the curbs, the rear of the car remained calm. That kind of stability is rare on a green track like Albert Park. Normally on Friday morning, drivers are constantly correcting the car. Small slides, tiny steering adjustments. But Hamilton's Ferrari looked planted, almost glued to the asphalt. And that stability became even more obvious when the drivers applied the throttle. Every time Hamilton exited a corner, the Ferrari simply accelerated cleanly. No wheel spin, no sudden oversteer. Just smooth traction. That detail might actually reveal one of the biggest strengths of the SF-26. Because Ferrari designed this car around a concept that focuses heavily on rear stability. The aerodynamic platform works together with the exhaust flow to energize the airflow feeding the diffuser. In simple terms, when the driver presses the throttle, the car gains extra aerodynamic stability at the rear. More throttle, more airflow energy, more downforce, which helps the car launch out of corners with incredible confidence. That is exactly what observers noticed throughout the first session today. But the second practice session would tell a more realistic story. Because in free practice 2, teams normally reveal more of their real pace. Fuel loads drop, softer tires appear, engine modes become more aggressive, and suddenly the timing screens begin to show which cars are truly competitive. At first, the picture started to change. McLaren looked very strong. Oscar Piastri delivered an impressive lap that placed the orange car at the top of the timesheets. Mercedes also appeared near the front. George Russell looked competitive. Andrea Kimi Antonelli followed closely. For a moment, it seemed like Ferrari might fall slightly behind the leaders. But something interesting happened as the session progressed. Ferrari never disappeared from the fight. Leclerc stayed comfortably inside the top group. Hamilton stayed right there with him, close enough to confirm something important. The pace we saw earlier in the day was not an accident. The Ferrari SF-26 was genuinely competitive. And perhaps the most important detail of the entire session was something fans rarely notice: consistency. Both Ferrari drivers completed their programs smoothly. No technical problems, no reliability concerns, just clean laps, again and again. And when a car combines speed with stability on the very first day of the season, that is when the rest of the paddock starts paying very close attention. Because that combination often means one thing: the car might be much stronger than people expected. And if Lewis Hamilton is already this comfortable inside the Ferrari, then what we saw today in Australia might only be the very beginning of something much bigger. But the most important thing Hamilton showed today was not just speed, it was confidence. And in Formula One, confidence changes everything. Because when a driver truly trusts the car beneath him, his driving style begins to change. The braking becomes later, the steering becomes smoother, and the car starts flowing through the corners instead of fighting them. That is exactly what Lewis Hamilton looked like today in Melbourne. Calm, precise, almost effortless. Watching the onboard footage, one detail became very clear. Hamilton was not wrestling with the Ferrari. He was guiding it, late on the brakes into turn 1. Very smooth rotation through the middle of the corner. Then extremely controlled throttle as the car launched onto the straight. That rhythm is not easy to achieve, especially at Albert Park. This circuit punishes unstable cars. It mixes fast direction changes with short acceleration zones. Drivers must attack the braking zones aggressively, rotate the car quickly, then immediately get back on the power. If the rear of the car is unstable, the lap time disappears instantly. But the Ferrari SF-26 did not look nervous. It looked balanced, and that balance may be the biggest improvement Ferrari has achieved with this car. Engineers spent months refining how airflow moves underneath the floor, how the diffuser generates rear downforce, and how the exhaust gases help energize that airflow when the driver accelerates. The goal was simple: create a car that remains stable when the driver attacks. And based on what we saw today, that concept might actually be working. But there is another reason why Hamilton's performance today raised eyebrows across the paddock. This is now his second season inside Ferrari. Last year was about adaptation, learning the systems, understanding how Ferrari engineers operate, building trust with the team. But this year is different. Now Hamilton knows the car philosophy. The communication with the engineers is natural. The feedback is precise. And you could hear that difference on the radio today. Short messages, clear adjustments, small balance corrections, nothing dramatic. That is usually the sign of a driver who already understands the machine. And when Lewis Hamilton reaches that level of comfort with a car, history shows something very dangerous often follows. Because Hamilton at his best is not just fast. He is incredibly consistent, managing tires, managing energy, positioning the car perfectly during races. That ability has won him 7 world championships. And if the Ferrari SF-26 truly provides the stability it showed today, then Hamilton might finally have the platform he needs to fight for another one. But there is still one factor that could make Ferrari's situation even more explosive. Inside the other side of the garage, there is Charles Leclerc. And today, Leclerc reminded everyone why he is one of the fastest drivers on the grid. In the very first session of the season, he placed the Ferrari at the top of the timing screens. Fast, precise, completely confident, which creates one of the most fascinating dynamics in Formula One this year. 2 elite drivers, 1 very promising car, and potentially 1 championship to fight for. But before Ferrari even reaches that internal battle, there is a much bigger question that the rest of the paddock is now asking. Was today simply a strong Friday for Ferrari? Or did Lewis Hamilton just show the first real glimpse of a car that could challenge for the 2026 world title? And that question might define everything that happens next. Because Fridays in Formula One can be misleading. Very misleading. Teams hide performance. Fuel loads vary. Engine modes stay conservative. What looks fast on Friday can disappear completely by qualifying. But sometimes, just sometimes, a Friday reveals something real. And today in Melbourne, several engineers quietly admitted they saw something they did not expect. The Ferrari did not just look quick. It looked complete, fast in slow corners, stable in high-speed sections, consistent across multiple laps. That combination is extremely difficult to achieve, especially on the first day of a new season, because most teams are still trying to understand their own cars. They are comparing data, adjusting setups, searching for the correct operating window. But Ferrari looked unusually comfortable. Leclerc immediately found pace. Hamilton immediately looked confident. And perhaps the most important detail of all, the car behaved consistently throughout the day. No dramatic balance swings. No sudden tire collapse. Just steady performance. That is why some analysts began asking a very interesting question after the sessions ended. What if Ferrari already understands the SF-26 better than the other teams understand their own cars? Because the philosophy behind this Ferrari is extremely aggressive. The power unit runs at very high combustion pressures. The bodywork packaging is extremely compact. The aerodynamic platform depends heavily on how airflow behaves under the floor. And yet, on day one, the car looked stable. That alone surprised many engineers in the paddock. But the deeper implication goes even further. Because if Ferrari truly understands how to operate this car from the beginning of the season, then their development curve could become very dangerous. In modern Formula One, championships are often decided in the first few races. Teams that start strong gain momentum. They understand their platform earlier. They introduce upgrades with more confidence. And suddenly the gap begins to grow.